Welcome into Hitting Hard with Jon Chuckery here on Locked On Sports Atlanta. Today on the show, reaction to the Hawks draft picks. The NL East is over, and the answer is just about everybody. It's all next. It's Hitting Hard with Jon Chuckery, Locked On Sports Atlanta.
This is Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. And it starts now.
Hitting Hard is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We ask you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast and get the latest episodes of Hitting Hard as soon as they become available. Check us out on the Sirius XM app as well, and give me a follow on my personal Twitter page at JMCH316. So the Atlanta Hawks did make their two selections last night, and they stayed right where they were. Pick number 15 was Kobe Bufkin out of the University of Michigan, and then they took Seth Lundy with the 46th pick out of a out of a Penn State, a couple of Big Ten schools. And then they got the draft rights to Mouhamed Gueye. I'm not even going to pronounce his name correctly here, but a couple of things about the Bufkin pick is, look, he's young, he's a sophomore. He's going to be a developmental project, right? I mean, we talked about this yesterday on the show that I didn't really care who the Hawks drafted. I didn't really care what the name was on the back of the jersey. Most likely that this is a kid that's going to go down to College Park and work on his game and get a chance to play on a regular, consistent basis. Now, he was at Michigan, as we said, the last couple of years, 33 starts that he made in 61 games. He was averaging 9 points, 3 boards, a couple of assists over the course of his career. But obviously, look, he's a good shooter. Quote from Hawks general manager Landry Fields, quote, "I've mentioned before about the Hawks DNA. Hawks DNA is about being in love with this game and giving it your all. And you'd be surprised how many guys do that and how many don't. But he's a guy that there's no doubt about it. That's a guy that loves this game. He's an unbelievable person. When we spoke to him in Chicago, that was another huge moment for me. He's just very mature. The way he sees the game, the feel, the IQ, the confidence that he has, just a very fluid type of player. He can play on ball and off ball and defends, and that's big for us as well. So, look, I don't mind the pick. I don't mind the position. You know, again, you're also thinking long-term about what this roster is going to be. If DeJounte Murray is not going to be here long-term, you're going to have to find that second guard, right? So, again, this is not necessarily checkers. This is chess. This is looking at the long-term with everything. And that's how we kind of thought that this draft would be approached by. Yes, best available player and all that good kind of stuff. No problem with that. But we also thought that this was going to be an approach where the Hawks were not looking for somebody to come up and make an impact on their roster right now. All right. I mean, that this kid would be in College Park when drafted, and he'll get a chance to develop. He'll get a chance to play a year or two down there and figure out his game and adjust to, life at the professional level and all these different types of things. Because frankly, that the Hawks don't need a guy who comes up and makes an impact right away. I mean, look, it's not LeBron James. It's not Dwayne Wade. It's not that kind of impact player. It's not Kevin Durant. They didn't draft that kind of player. But what they've got is a guy who can develop. You can put him in your system, for lack of a better term, your farm system, let him play on a nightly basis and then impact, the game long term. So I got no problem with the draft. I thought that the Hawks would pick 15th. I didn't think that there was going to be movement. We heard some rumors and rumblings that maybe DeAndre Hunter was in a package to go to Indiana. We also heard that Clint Capella could be in a package to go up to the 10th spot with Dallas. I mean, we heard all these kinds of things, but at the end of the day, that there was no movement, no trades that happened. with the Atlanta Hawks. They've stayed right where they were at. They drafted their guys and they made the most of it, So like the Bufkin pick, I mean, it's like I said, not a problem. Again, long-term pick, not any kind of short-term gratification. And now the real work begins, because we've talked about this yesterday on the program and talked about it multiple times here. The work is now going to be seeing what this team can do. Now we get down into free agency and we get hardcore into all of it. And what is this roster going to look like? What is going to be the DNA? The Hawks talking about their DNA. What's the DNA of what this roster is going to be? Because again, I think it's a fundamentally flawed roster. I don't think you need to blow everything up, but I think there are some missing chromosomes in here. But again, we'll see if they run it back, if they make some big moves and this, then the other. So this was last night, step one of what the Hawks are going to look like for the 2023 season. So this is the first step in that evolution. Not even so much from the standpoint of what the actual Hawks roster is going to look like itself, because again, I don't think Bufkin's going to be on the roster, but what they're thinking about long-term. Had they have drafted somebody who was a center or maybe a power forward, then that person might have had a chance to make the roster and play. But I think when you look at backcourt guys, then I think when you look at a backcourt guy, then I think that player is more likely to spend his time down in College Park, because they really, truthfully, they don't need as much backcourt help. And what you're really looking for more than anything is adding a backup point guard to Trae Young. So if you've got a backup point guard who should be a veteran player, and you got DeJounte and Trae, you're pretty well set. I mean, you need maybe one more guard, but again, that's not going to be a rookie. There's not necessarily a place for a rookie guard to play much more than just a few minutes a night. So hence, better off to just leave that player down in College Park. So Hawks draft last night, they stayed exactly where they wanted to be. There was no trades or anything like that. And, again, last year when I was at the draft, I would remember that John Collins was going to be traded on draft night and all this kind of hoopla and speculation, but there were no real storylines like that. Like I said, DeAndre Hunter was listed as part of a potential package going to Indiana. And the only other rumor that I was hearing was Clint Capella with the number 10 pick with the Dallas Mavericks. So again, Hawks for now have stayed put. They stayed right where they were slotted to draft. They took both of their draft picks, and let's see, let's see the kid. And I guess he'll be in summer camp when all is said and done. Excuse me. He'll be in summer camp. He'll play in summer league, and we'll see what he looks like here. But again, he's young. Everybody in the NBA draft is young, at this point, but he's a young player. He's going to take time to develop, but he'll be a guy that, again, when Landry Fields talks about the Hawks DNA and things like that, defensively, I don't know much about his defense, but Landry Fields seems to think that he can become a good defender. Okay. I mean, this is where you got to trust Landry Fields in the scouting and evaluation. Because if you look over the last few years, the last handful of years, the draft has been sort of a mixed bag for the Atlanta Hawks. I mean, we didn't get much out of Cam Reddish. And again, I'm going back to the previous administration, but Cam Reddish, DeAndre Hunter, that wasn't exactly the best draft that we've ever had. But Onyeka Okongwu was a really good draft pick. And now hopefully Bufkin can be a good draft pick as well. So we'll see what happens, but I like the picks. Don't have a problem with them. And again, it's the first step in the evolution of what the Atlanta Hawks are going to look like here over the course of the season. All right, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. As you know, FanDuel is America's #1 sports book, and as we're neck deep into baseball season and headed toward the All-Star break, FanDuel's got a deal for you where if you're a new customer to FanDuel, you can sign up and claim your no-sweat first bet, where if your first bet doesn't win, you can get as much as $1,000 in bonus bets if that first bet doesn't win. That's $1,000 in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, FanDuel.com/LOCKEDON, and sign up today and claim your no-sweat first bet where you can get as much as $1,000 in bonus bets. FanDuel is safe, super easy to use, secure. They let you bet on everything from money lines, prop bets, how many homers Aaron Judge is going to hit, what have you. You can bet on everything in between. So go to FanDuel.com and claim your no-sweat first bet, where you can get as much as $1,000 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on. FanDuel.com/LOCKEDON. FanDuel's the official partner of Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball trademarks used with permission. So I'm going to proclaim it that after the Atlanta Braves beat the Philadelphia Phillies, and obviously one of the games got rained out, so they swept the New York Mets. They took 2 games from Philadelphia. Now, when you look at the MLB standings, the Braves are 6 games up on the Miami Marlins, 10 games up now on the Philadelphia Phillies, 14 games up on the Mutts, and we don't even count the Nationals as a Major League Baseball team. I'll go ahead and say it. The NL East is over. And I'm not trying to be Sal Licata, hot take guy, and go on TV and proclaim all this kind of stuff. But when you look at this Braves team, and not just that they're playing so well in the month of June, which we talked about in the month of June, that they have a last place schedule. They play a lot of last place teams, other than the Phillies and the Mets. And if you take care of your business against them, there's all kinds of room to expand. We've been over all this, right? But the NL East is over. When you look at this Phillies team and the New York Mets, there's nothing about those teams that inspire you to say that they're going to go on a 20-game win streak or what have you. I'll tell you what's going to be interesting is the series that's going to start today with the Cincinnati Reds, whereas the Reds won their 11th game in a row, and they are, I think their franchise record is 12 games. This is a pretty hefty matchup when you look at Braves and Reds. Braves have won 8 in a row. Reds have won 11 in a row, trying to tie their franchise record, but we'll get to that, another time. But the NL East is over. And when you look at this division, look at the Braves with a plus 106 run differential. Look at the rest of the division. The Marlins are a minus 16, and they're hanging tough. They're 10 games over 500. I give them credit. 10 games over 500. They're a minus 16 run differential. The Phillies are a minus 19 run differential. The Mets are a minus 15 run differential, and then the Washington Nationals are a minus 61. None of those teams are going to go off on any kind of hot streak. And not only that, but one of the things that the Braves have done so well is when the Mets and Phillies go head-to-head with the Atlanta Braves, the Braves take those series. And that was the difference last year, and that's been the difference over the last few years as to why the Braves have had success. Now, again, remember, we're not playing these 19 games anymore as far as your division goes, so there are a few less division games, but I'll say it, that the NL East is over. And I don't see a reason. And think about the remarkable nature of the Braves, where you've lost your starting shortstop, from last year in Dansby Swanson, kind of one of the cornerstones of this team. You've had all the injuries to pitchers. Ian Anderson out for the year. Wright and Fried are on 60-day ILs. Michael Soroka still kind of work his way into the rotation or get himself back up to full strength and become a viable piece. And through all of this, you didn't have Iglesias to start the year. Through all of this, the Braves have had a remarkable run, and their offense has been outstanding. It's the deepest lineup in baseball, and their pitching staff, when you look at Strider and Morton and Elder, like, they've gotten quality starting pitching. Look, Elder's had a fantastic year. He's 5-1 with a 2.4 ERA. Strider's got 8 wins already. He's got 136 strikeouts in 84 innings. I think in the modern era, it's only Dwight Gooden and Spencer Strider that have 300 career strikeouts in like 35 starts. It's just ridiculous. So when you look at this division, there's nothing that tells me that all of a sudden the Mets and Phillies are going to turn around the Titanic and find a way to rattle off a whole number of wins. And when this team, when the Braves match up directly head to head, that's where they make their most hay. This was an opportunity that if the Phillies or Mets were going to make a move in this division, then something had to start now. Something had to start where, okay, we only have a few games against the Atlanta Braves in this particular month of June, and they have a last place schedule, but we've got to make some hay against these guys, and they couldn't do it. And the Mets and Phillies went 0-5, with a rain out mixed in to all of this. Mets and Phillies had their chance and went 0-5. And that's the biggest reason that I look and say that this division is over. Yeah, technically, we're only headed toward the All-Star break. And, right now the Braves have, only played less than half of their schedule thus far. But still, when you look at this thing, and the Braves are 48-26, so they have 74 games that they've played right now. When you look at this thing, though, there's nothing about any of those other teams that are in the division that tell you that, okay, they're about to go on some extended winning streak. And who knows? I mean, I still question whether or not if the Phillies and Mets are sitting 12, 15 games out of first place, will those teams stay with what they have? Again, they've added all of this payroll, right? They've added all of this money to their payroll and all of these players and all this, that, and the other, and they're getting bupkis out of it. They're getting nothing for it. Will they stay with that, or will they start to move some pieces off on this roster? That will probably not come until the offseason because, again, the way that they are building this thing hasn't worked at all. And all the money that they've doled out for the New York Mets hasn't paid off at all as they sit 14 games out of the division. So I'll go ahead and say it. I'll go ahead and proclaim it, not to be hot take guy or anything like that. But when you realistically look and you look at what the facts of the matter are, the NL East is over. There's nothing about the Phillies and the Mets being 10 and 14 games back that tells you that all of a sudden, when the end of the year comes along, that the Braves are going to get overtaken, that they're going to, be beaten by the Mets and Phillies, that they're going to get overtaken in the standings, that the Miami Marlins, and when they play the Marlins, they'll do the same exact thing. Once they get into some head-to-head competition, they'll play the same exact way. The Marlins will fold like a cheap tent, and this thing will be over. And again, the nice part will be is that with all of the injuries and everything else, people can't complain about, well, the Braves were relatively healthy and all this kind of stuff. No, the Braves weren't relatively healthy. They are doing this without without what they thought was going to be, about 60% of their starting pitching right now, or at least 40% of their starting pitching. A guy that won 21 games last year and the best left-hander in baseball. They've been able to do it without. And then they've sprinkled in injuries all throughout the season. Arcia was hurt for 20-something games. Iglesias was their closer. He was hurt at the beginning of the season. They sprinkled all of this in amongst all of their injuries, and yet they've had a remarkable run. So I'll say it, and I think it's certainly true, is that the NL East is over. There's nothing about the Phillies and the Mets that are going to overtake the Atlanta Braves. All right, as you make Hittin' Hard your first listen, be sure to go in and leave us a comment that you're an everyday listener to the program. We like to call them our everydayers, and we thank you so much for being a part of this program and for being a part of our growth and everything for the last, about 14 months now, 14, 15 months now that we've been around. So we thank you so much for it, but leave us a comment in whatever platform that you're listening on that you're an everyday listener and everydayer to the program. So we're just talking about the Atlanta Braves and the fact that the NL East is over. So in the question of who's an all-star for the Braves, the answer is just about everybody. And we saw yesterday that Ronald Acuna Jr. was the leading vote getter for the National League. So he becomes, a starting all-star player again. And look, not only is Ronnie the all-star leading vote getter, he's the MVP of the league. What a remarkable season. Listen to these numbers already. 64 runs scored, 21 doubles, 15 homers, 46 RBI, 32 stolen bases. hitting .324 with a 400 on base and a .952 OPS. Now think about the fact that we've only played 74 games thus far, that we're not even halfway through the season, and he's looking at being a 30-60 guy. Forget 30-30. He's looking at being a 30-60 guy, scoring a whole crap ton of runs, and he's almost ready to drive in. I mean, again, he's on pace to drive in almost 100 runs. You talk about five-tool guys and complete baseball players, there's nobody like Ronnie. But when you look at other guys who should be all-stars along with him, I think Sean Murphy, who's having his best offensive year, and he's gotten out of that godforsaken Oakland Alameda Coliseum baseball park, but he's got 33 runs, 12 homers, 42 RBI. He's hitting .286 with a .383 on-base percentage. Even for Matt Olson's struggles with the batting average, he's got 21 homers and 52 RBIs and 52 runs. So he's looking at being a 40 homer, 100 RBI, 100 run scored kind of guy. Ozzie's had a remarkable season. He's really got it cranked up here. I think he leads the National League in RBI now, 17 homers, 53 RBI. What's remarkable is he's only stolen 3 bases, which is a low number for Ozzie, but only 3 bases without having been caught. He's on pace for 72 runs scored right now. Well, I mean, that'll be probably almost 80 runs scored by the time we get to the halfway point. And obviously, Orlando Arcia is a guy that belongs in the All-Star game, hitting .333 with a remarkable .392 on-base percentage. Look, I know he had the time missed the 20 games, but still, 6 homers, 25 RBI, 32 runs, hitting .333, playing really good defense. He should be an all-star. They're pitching. Bryce Elder should be an all-star. 5-1 with a 2.4 ERA. Spencer Strider, 8-2, 136 strikeouts, leads the majors in strikeouts, right? They're just up and down this team. So many guys that deserve to be all-stars. So Ronnie won't be alone. I mean, there'll be a whole handful of guys, at the All-Star game when he's there. But there are so many deserving candidates. And I hope that the Braves find their way to having a whole crap ton of guys to reward them for the season that they've had thus far. No matter what happens in the second half, and I think it's just going to be a roll to to another, divisional title. But they should be rewarded for what a remarkable start to this season that it's been. And again, I know that the All-Star game doesn't factor in injuries and different things like that, just as far as what your team has gone through and this, and the other. But again, as we just talked about, the fact that this team has overcome the adversity, whether your starting shortstop's been missing 20 games, whether you have 2 of your top pitchers that have missed most of the year and only made a few starts and won't be back for, probably until sometime in August. We're talking about Max Fried the other day, probably going to be, toward the, part of the, maybe like end of July or something like that before he's ready and available. You've had so many guys that have contributed so many different ways, and there are so many guys that deserve to be an all-star that I think that they're going to be rewarded. They've been the best team in the National League. Their offense has been outstanding, especially this last, this month of June. Their offense has been outstanding, averaging 7 runs a game. They've got guys all up and down the lineup. Even Marcell Ozuna has contributed significantly to this team. Not that he's an all-star, but he's contributed significantly to this team, right? Hit the go-ahead home run yesterday and, put that game out of reach, 5-1, against the Phillies. So it's been a remarkable run for the Atlanta Braves. And look, this may be the best Braves team we've seen in a while. Once they get healthy and they get everybody back and they get everybody, they're in the rotation. And there are some guys, obviously, Ian Anderson not going to be back this year, but they get Fried and Wright back. If Michael Soroka can find his way up, getting everybody healthy on offense now. Everybody looks like they're healthy, ready to go. Travis d'Arnaud and Michael Harris and all these guys that missed games earlier in the year, everybody's healthy now and contributing. So when you say who's an all-star for the Atlanta Braves, it's just about everybody, right? I mean, not being facetious, but it's just about everybody that deserves to be an all-star for this team. So many great contributions, and I hope a lot of guys get rewarded. Not just Ronnie, who's the leading vote getter, but I definitely think Ozzie, Sean Murphy, Bryce Elder, I think all of those guys deserve their spot to be on the all-star team. So it's a remarkable run, and you should reward one of the best teams in all of Major League Baseball, certainly the best team in the National League. They should get rewarded very heavily when the All-Star game comes around. All right, we thank you so much for making Hittin' Hard your first listen. Be sure to go in and leave us a comment on whatever platform that you're listening in on, and let us know that you're an everyday listener to the program. We like to call them our everydayers. So we thank you so much for being a part of our growing community, but let us know that you're an everyday listener to the show. We ask you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can get the latest episodes of Hittin' Hard as soon as they become available. Also, check us out on the SiriusXM app as well, and give me a follow on my personal Twitter page at JMCH316. Back with you on Monday. This has been Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery, Locked on Sports Atlanta.